are coming up right now at 1 p.m. Mountain Time, and I believe we have Neely that is coming to us. And I think Lee has actually joined the call. Lee, feel free to jump in there and show us a camera if you would like. And
absolutely.
There he is. All right, Lee and I have seen each other on Thursdays for quite a long time now. In fact, we're good pals. We've known each other for quite some time, and we do spend some time co-hosting Security Weekly. So we have time together. So Lee, your topic today is going to be on how I spent my COVID-19 spring vacation, or Extreme Telecommuting Security. I love that title. That is fantastic. Let's see if I've got some, let me see if I've got a bio on you, Lee, or maybe I'll just let you tell us about yourself. Somewhere here. There we go. I've got it. I've got your bio.
Lay it on me. Let's see what I said.
I'm going to embarrass you then. Lee Neely is a senior IT and security professional at Lawrence Livermore National Labs. I actually knew that. With over 30 years of extensive experience, making him one of the old guys right along with me. And let's see, what else is there? Wide variety of technology and applications, from point implementations to enterprise solutions. He currently leads the lab's Entrust team and is the CSP lead for new technology adoption, specializing in mobility, and he teaches cybersecurity in courses and holds several different security certifications. And not only that, Lee is just a damn nice guy and a good friend. So we are very glad to have Lee here. We'll give John a word if he wants a word.
Oh, okay, John.
Hi, man. How you doing?
Good.
Glad you could.
You know, well, it's great. It was nice to see you in person just a couple weeks ago.
Let's
see if I can do this.
That was the day. So just so you all know, we got a foot of snow on our house the day that he shows up at the office to visit. And the power was out, and kids' school stuff was going crazy. It was absolutely just total pandemonium. So I feel absolutely horrible because I was able to give him a quick hug, a COVID hug, right? Because we were socially distanced.
That's it.
And then I had to scurry away. So it was just kind of an embarrassing thing, and I apologize. But hey, next time you come out, steak dinner. Sound like a plan?
You got it. You know, and if you're ever out this way, same offer for both of you.
I'll take you up on it.
All right. Definitely.
I know John's only about a 14-hour drive from me.
Yeah, I'm considerably further.
It's not, no, John, no. It's no. We had planned this road trip. When we found out, we had planned to come to Deadwood with Wild West Hacking Fest was going to be there and visit you in person. And we've had a whole bunch of travel trips canceled this year, from our South Africa trip to our Denali trip to everywhere. And when the last one got canceled, we put together this road trip. We did a huge figure eight. We hit Craters of the Moon. We hit Rushmore. We hit Devil's Tower. We hit the Badlands. We hit Wall Drug. We had 3 days in Jellystone looking for Boo Boo and Yogi. We had a wonderful time. And since we were doing that, we were so close, we couldn't not stop by the shop and Spearfish to see who was around. That would have just been rude. So absolutely no problem there. And it was so fun because we, just picking our direction. We had the hotel set, and it was a ball. The funniest thing about once I got back in this area, driving at night, instead of doing my usual, making sure I wasn't running into deer, I was looking for bison and moose and elk. We don't have those down here, but I was looking for them because, I'd had to for the last couple of days. It was kind of cool. So it was a wonderful trip. Shelley wishes she could be here with us. She has got pneumonia and not up for it. Ooh. So this was wonderful. It was yes, and she's actually much better. So she gave me a hard stop in about an hour and a half. I'm thinking we can get it done in that. You know what I mean? So anyway, I've had a wonderful time. Learned a hell of a lot this summer about adaptive and application of COOP. I think we all have. And in fact, I was going to say, Shelley titled the next slide. Let's see if I can get the slide advancing thing.
I suppose we'll just turn it over to you.
That was our experience.
I said, we'll just turn it over to you and let you take it away from here. How does that sound?
Sounds groovy. But I the realization that suddenly everybody's working from home was just incredible. We had a new dynamic of remote work, work from home, but it wasn't just work from home. It was updating and adapting policies. It was getting everybody equipped. It was complications because we hadn't necessarily thought what would scale. So what I wanted to talk about was issues, fixes, things we had to do, things we're going to do to prevent recurrence. How can we use this new mindset in the future? Because you know what? We're all thinking about COOP. We weren't. We didn't have the same reality 6 months ago. The big issues that we saw when we suddenly had 100% workforce, think about that for a second, 100% workforce. Where I work at Lawrence Livermore, the workforce was about 5% remote. Now, I know some of you are in companies that have much larger percentages of remote work. Things, culture change, equipment change. How do you work from home? Some of us, I would think, I would call professional telecommuters. I've been I had the luxury of working from home for the last 2.5 years. It's really liberating, but you need success and you need to be backed up. And let's start with the simple stuff. Not everybody has a laptop. A lot of people still are issued desktops, or what they have is this thing that came out of the supply cabinet. It's a laptop. Might have just work as well if it was made out of cardboard. It's that old. I've had just people tell me this is my laptop and they're holding up an iPad or Android tablet. It's not the same. It does work remotely, but you can't do everything on it. And even with the gap, now we have to figure out how to get them, how to get them set up and provisioned, how to get them secured, how to deliver them. Or do we want to allow them to take the desktop home? Was that desktop set up to run outside your corporate environment? Or how about this? What happens when you have a damaged system? What do you do then? So by the way, I am not taking the desktop home for multiple reasons, including which most desktops don't have wireless. And yeah, you could put a dongle on the back and get it on the home wireless. We didn't build a security or engineer it for that. It's better to have a laptop that was built for that. And if I'm taking my laptop home, is that the right user interface for 40 hours a day for an indefinite period? Remember, we all started this. It was 2 weeks, maybe 6 weeks we were going to be home. And let's see here, T-minus 6 months. You know the joke. Excuse me, have you got the month? Anyway, so the other thing is that not everybody has a home office. This photo made me laugh because I know so many people have doing presentations and they are dressed from the waist up. To be honest with you, I can't work from home unless I'm dressed for work. Even though it gets warm here in the summer, it took a bunch of pretty much beating me over the head from my wife to actually telecommute in shorts, because I was used to wearing Docker slacks to work. And so you need to be in the work mindset. But the other thing is the couch, the kitchen counter, the dining room table really aren't appropriate workspaces, but so many of our coworkers are working from them. And so they don't have privacy to conduct corporate business. They haven't, you've got the kids running through, you got the dog running through. Well, the dog may not be a data exfiltration problem, although participating in the meeting may be interesting, or the cat that steps on the keyboard. Well, that's because they're cats and that's their right. Just ask them, they'll tell you that. Ergonomics. Ergonomics. You know what? We figured out how to do remote ergonomics. You take some photos of your workspace with your cell phone, send it to the ergo team, and they talk to you. You have a ruler, and they're saying, well, how far is that? No, it's too far. But I've got other folks I talk to, they're curled up on the couch trying to work. And it just doesn't work. I mean, you notice this guy's got his laptop balanced on the corner of the chair. It's crazy. You need an effective workspace. You also need privacy. Back before we moved to Idaho, I am in Idaho, my wife and I had a nice office with about a 6-foot-long desk that we both used. It wasn't a problem. But when it came to working full-time, I needed my own office, and she has her own office so that we don't get in each other's spaces. These are dumb moments, but hello, not everybody had that. And with 100% at home, the kids are home, the spouse are home, everybody. You don't have that. I've got the house to myself, that you had before. And then another interesting thing, not everybody has a sufficient net connection. I have a business net connection with guaranteed quality of service. Most of my neighbors do not. So I'm talking to them about their work from home experience. They're having all kinds of lags and queue and all these issues that the extra expense paid for itself. So the other thing is, beyond the guaranteed service and the bandwidth, is the availability. I have a guaranteed service level. Home internet typically is, if it works, great. Early on in past experience, I learned that with a business internet, if I have an issue, they can actually give me an ETA and even alert me when the service is back. Try that with the home internet option. Not so much. A shared connection. Now, this has two meanings. One, depending on the architecture of your internet connection, you may not have a shared, a dedicated connection back to the central office. That is what it is, and it's whether you buy, and you can argue whether DSL or cable or fiber. If you can get it, I recommend fiber to the house, but it's not everywhere. I know this. The other thing is, with COVID, we're sharing the internet connection with you, the spouse, the kids doing remote learning, that damn cat again. I used to have 5 cats, okay? They all died of natural causes. Or how about this one? You all know that person who rocks a MiFi and said, this is all I need to be online. The thing about it is, even with unlimited services, typically MiFi gets to a bandwidth cap and starts shrinking the bandwidth. The data cap, gets to a shrink. And speaking of data caps, how about that? Are you on a data cap? That's something to think about. And cost. Your business internet costs a lot more. When I was first looking for options to the house, one of the internet providers said, if you want gig to the house, we'll be happy to give it to you. It's $5,000 a month. Another one said, I can do it for $1,000 a month. And somebody in the middle with $3,500. I am not paying that much. I worked with I'm using cable, and I've worked with get a price I like hell of a lot better. So once we're hooked up, here's the technology use. If you're used to working in meetings, like here we are sitting in GoToMeeting, and we're fairly comfortable at it, but not everybody knows how to use the technology, how to start a meeting. When you're the lone telecommuter, so I've had these conversations where the meeting isn't going because I don't know how to start it. Not so good of an answer. Or how to schedule it. How do I include? Whether I'm not biased to the form, whether it's WebEx, Zoom, Microsoft Teams. Knowing how to schedule a meeting and remembering to do so when you invite everybody. The good news is, with our last 6 months, this has become SOP. Everybody's doing it. It may become a challenge when we go back to the office. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. Meeting etiquette, when to mute, when to unmute. Should you introduce yourself before you talk? In a small meeting, we all know who's talking, but in a big one, how do you join? Some meetings are set up where you wait in the lobby till you're admitted. Some are with a password. Remember all the stuff about Zoom bombing, when people were setting up Zoom meetings without a password. those of us in the corporate space, pretty much we configured the meeting servers to require a password. But with this flurry of rapid adoption, Zoom just worked. And I'm not hating on Zoom, because you could delete Zoom and insert another service. If it's not secure for joining, you wind up with people in your meeting who shouldn't be there. The good news is we've had best practices for meeting come out. And oh, by the way, which technology to use? Now, they behave differently. Different technologies, for example, when I'm sitting here with a video on, some of them real CPU hogs, others less so. There's typically a supporting process that's eating up a chunk of CPU. So you have to learn to shut other things down in the background. Today, I'm actually running on a backup laptop because I broke my primary. And I discovered that a couple of my programs that I normally leave running in the background were chewing up the machine. This machine's lighter capacity. But still, does the average person know to look for that and take care of them? By the way, when we were talking about internet bandwidth and the CPU load of the video, sometimes they scale down the video. So you get cruddy video because of CPU, not internet bandwidth. And so you have to balance the two. On our podcast, we sometimes have to have people turn off HD video because they don't have the bandwidth or the CPU to sustain it. And suddenly the screen will go from what you see in front of you to about a quarter the size because it's ramped back for the user. Or I was on a call where I had forgotten to do that, and the application just shut off my video saying, I'm sorry, too much. But these are things people need to know. Whoops, click, there we go. So one of the cool ongoing activities was discover of solutions for problems and reassessing and reevaluating. And this ranged the gap from providing desktops to alternate desktops, collaboration tools, and what about personal equipment? And answering some of the same questions again and again. We learned we had to assess the equipment that was available. I mean, in some cases, you're opening the supply room door and you look and you see the 7 laptops for 34 people that don't have a laptop, and you've got a gap. Having laptops in reserve, my employer was fortunate. We actually had quite a supply of laptops in reserve and in the pipeline. But maybe not the peripherals. I mean, to be effective at home, you really need a monitor and you need a USB headset. Those weren't necessarily in supply. Some people had them and some people didn't. We had to assess what to do and come up with stopgaps. By the way, those laptops in the closet, how quickly can you deploy them? What's their status? Are they still shrink wrapped? Are they image? Do you have it set up so when they get plugged in, they'll download the right image and configure themselves? Do you have contracts to obtain items rapidly? Remember those DR COOP plans you had? You did the tabletop exercise for what happens if all of a sudden there's a big issue at work? And you put those supplies in place, or Joe Random was supposed to and didn't. Here's you exercise that actually happened. This is a good lesson to learn. What was it like when you actually went to use the deployable systems you had? Oh, speaking of my damaged laptops, how do you repair a system that somebody's got at home? Fortunately, our repair system allows for me an option that I can mail it in instead of having to take a flight. And it's an approved repair facility. You don't necessarily want an employee taking a corporate device to the local repair center because you're not in necessarily having the quality and not necessarily quality, but the control and observations of the repair services. And what about backup systems? Do you guys issue backup laptops? The laptop I'm on is rather old, but it's work. So while equipment's being delivered, what do? Do you allow somebody to use their personal system? Challenge with the personal system. What if you're processing corporate data on non-corporate systems? Is that a DLP opportunity? Is that, by the way, if it's my personal system, who has access to it? Does my spouse, my kids? You don't really know. So maybe virtual desktops. The cool thing about virtual desktops is that you can scale them, and pretty much all you're using that machine for, this personal, is a gateway. It's a terminal. I'm old, I use terms like that, but it's basically a remote keyboard and mouse display. Much lower risk. You've augmented with personal peripherals. Are you going to map the USB drive to that virtual machine? Maybe not a good idea. Maybe it is a good idea. What about printing? And of course, the other issue with personal peripherals, supply chain security. The stuff you bought, you vetted, you've decided on your usage. But if I buy my own from Amazon, am I getting it from a place? They're both Amazon, but I mean, if you looked on Amazon about a month into the pandemic, you saw that all your familiar sources were out of, say, webcams, but there were some less reputable ones who were happy to sell them for a modest markup of 50 to 200%. So when it comes to remote desktops, one of the cool things we learned is the ability to scale. Don't just think terminal, server, and RDP. Those are still things. But think about taking your cloud service provider and having it able to provision them on the fly. But then you have to make a choice. Every time I ask for one, do I get a new one? Or can I provision it, put the applications in, and have it be custom to me when I show up? However, protect your entry point. I don't recommend making these services directly available to the internet. Have some sort of VPN or other secure gateway in the middle, particularly at a time now when you're running with scissors. You're going so fast that it's easy to miss security settings. In fact, one of the recurring things I've been seeing is that people are going back and rechecking security settings after the fact, which is really not ideal. We really need to get them right, but we've had to run really fast. So virtual desktops have been a win. We have used them all over. Like, we had 500 summer students running on virtual desktops with their own system. But even then, we had to decide if we were going to allow them to use a Chromebook, because of the VPN support for the Chromebook was not as good. We chose not to. These are things you have to think about. Online collaboration. Do your systems scale? Where are the gaps? Where are the risks? Have you thought about information protection? For example, I'm in a very regulated space. In the government, we don't just have unclassified and classified. We have about 8 variants of unclassified, some of which have many regulatory requirements on them, which you can't do. For example, when Zoom was routing through China, and the Zoom staff could get to your session, and I'm talking about something that's export controlled, that's a deemed export. Department of Commerce would like to talk to me about a penalty fine for doing that. But more mundane, what is the protection of the session? Are you encrypted end-to-end? And I don't mean end-to-end like they're talking about today. What I'm talking about is, you know, the video and audio and the presentation is over TLS, but when you call in over the phone, that hits a public switch network. Those aren't encrypted. Yes, your cell phone uses LTE to the tower, but then it makes a bridge to a non-encrypted connection. To think about, may not matter. Suitability of service. Oh, and I meant to mention shadow IT. They're running fast too. People are coming up with solutions. That's where you find out how you can legitimize them or not. And when you need new services, get them online quickly. Don't horse around. Okay, we got personal stuff in the mix. How are we going to secure it? One of the interesting things you can do is your endpoint protection provider may have an option to allow you to license their product, the version of your product, for personal use, and you can install it on the home computers. And if you implement a posture check with your VPN, you can make sure it's there and running, or another one. It doesn't have to be yours, but that they are not running without protections before you even allow them to connect. You do have to decide what actions are insufficient. Are you going to quarantine them? Are you going to force them to disconnect? You have to decide what the risks are. And like I said, the endpoint, and I do apologize for the yellow items on the slide. I'm colorblind. They're almost white on white for me. I hope none of the rest of you are so bothered. The other thing about personal is we're teaching people about the importance and relevance of VPN, not just to corporate systems, but if people are out running around on hotspots at the local coffee shop, I guess not so much right now, but how to use a VPN, even if it's not yours, to help protect that communication as well as prevent unauthorized entry points or tampering of their system. I mentioned multi-user systems. I want to mention it again. One thing about personal systems, you cannot assume they are single user. And because you don't own them, it's really legally slippery to say only you can use it. No, they can have accounts for multiple people, but don't assume they do that. Assume they're all logging in together with the same whatever the heck. So let's talk about preventing recurrence. One of the big things is, how about remote support? One of the interesting changes that went in, just actually not related to COVID, our remote site said, look, we've got users working remotely, and we're using a support tool that only really works over our network. We need to put a server out on the edge so that we can talk to them. And we got that all approved. Actually, it was about February. Nothing to do with COVID. And it really was a saver, because now, whether you use somebody's on a personal or a corporate laptop, if they need help from the help desk, they can remote to their system. They just have to acknowledge it. When it comes to support from personal devices, though, you got to figure out what the impact is. Do you need a special client? They install something, or what's your model going to be for getting it on there? Not a hard problem, but you got to think about it. It should be easily installed. Also, what's the licensing? If your support tool isn't licensed for that, they're going to want to talk to you. Also, when it comes to just connecting with users, you need multiple paths, because not everybody's figured out how to make their desk phone ring on their cell phone, their home phone, or wherever, or that they got the soft phone working. It's a matter of it's failover, it's DR, it's planning. We discovered training gaps. So I mentioned the challenges with VTC, but another challenge is most people aren't familiar, as I'm saying, with how to configure their office phone to ring in more than one place. Some would set it to forward, which just works. It rings in another place, but they forwarded it to their corporate cell phone, which didn't have voicemail set up. So you'd call somebody and there's nobody home. You can't leave a message because it says this is unconfigured. Not a good model. Whereas there's another option where it can simultaneously ring, like having it ring on multiple extensions, then it uses the corporate voicemail system. That's just one example. Best practices when telecommuting is also a thing. Not just having a good workforce, it's also discipline, keeping a fixed schedule. That was really tough this last 6 months when we had everybody home and we had to take care of people. But normally with telecommuting, you want to keep a defined schedule. Yeah, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Don't eat at your desk. Take a break. You need it. And yes, people will see me do it. I know that. But I generally do not. I go out and actually have a lovely back patio with one of my favorite views of outside that I go and eat out there as long as the weather is conducive. Duh moment. People that professionally telecommute, I know that's a crazy term, but they can mentor those that are new to it and help them learn from their mistakes. And actually, one of the things I'm working on a project is what can we capture into training and knowledge-based articles to help people in the future? Because we know there's going to be more telecommuting in our future as we've really changed the bar on what we can do. There has indeed been a greater acceptance. Where I am, there were things that were listed, you shall not do these things remotely. Guess what? They work remotely. You just have to be available and connect with people, and you can get it done. One of the bigger challenges is exempt versus non-exempt, I mean, whether you get overtime or you're exempt from overtime. With hourly workers, there's a lot more labor laws. And there was a lot of hesitation as to whether to trust hourly to do the right thing at home. Turns out you can trust your staff, but you got to tell them what the rules are, what they have to do, and have them attest to it and be upfront. The same can apply for bargaining units, but often those are not set up for telecommuting. Once again, you have to think it through and look at all the details. One of the challenges we saw in the past, and I think we're working to make sure it doesn't happen as we return to normal, whatever normal is making sure there's equal treatment for on-site and off-site workers. Just because you can't physically be in the meeting every day doesn't mean you're not doing your job. And challenge what work you don't think can be done remotely. There are some things, and I'll talk about them later, that really can't do remotely. But there's more than you think. And of course, as we're doing all this stuff remotely, have you looked at the capacity of your services? When we did our COOP plan, we said, we can handle this many. We can handle, say, 10,000 users. We went to COVID, we had 8,000 and our VPN fell over, okay? We had to rapidly stand up a secondary service for folks, and it worked much better. It turns out, yes, it would handle that many, but at this bandwidth, it wasn't really effective. How is the traffic routed? Do you need to route the video and conference part of your VTC session through your VPN, or do you just need to take care of routing the setup and negotiation so you're not putting that, particularly the video streams, through that VPN and back? Things to think about. What should you not do? I don't encourage split tunneling at the endpoint, but at the server side, you may choose what service that don't make sense to route and get your bandwidth back. How big is your ISP at the office? Have you got, not everybody has multiple 100 gigabit connection. A lot of offices are much smaller ones. What happens when everybody's banging through them? This is the same question you have when you start doing extreme cloud services, because now all that communication that was going to your server rooms is now going out into the cloud. These are things to think about as you move forward, as well as in the past. And everybody's gotten better at troubleshooting. Users, support staff, people who were never in the troubleshooting business because of hallway tag. Now they're troubleshooting, and now the trick is capturing them. Make sure we've learned and applied those practices. Policy changes. I'm actually on a working group. There are several working groups working on the future of telecommuting where I'm at, and I'm working with the policy group and the training group. And one of the things we had to address a lot of was personal peripheral use. It sounds silly, but we had a rule: no personal devices connected to government furnished equipment, which was fine up until now. You got to break it down as to what kind of connections are okay and what kind aren't. For example, a VGA connection, pretty damn low risk, as is DVI. One thing that'll trip you up, if you look into the HDMI spec, there is an Ethernet connection possible. Turns out, one, almost no computer is implemented, because really for folks in the professional video business. And two, even if it is there in the video card, it'll show up like another network connection. So it's about the same risk as hooking up an Ethernet cable to your computer. Then you got to provide guidance. I don't know how many times we had the can I connect here to there connection and revise the guidance, but we finally nailed it. How about alternate services? Do you want to allow somebody who just decides they cannot collaborate externally using your Office 365 to go over to the G Suite and start doing it? Better yet, with the free G Suite. Is that okay or not okay? You've got to look at that. What type of work will you not permit at home and what type will you? You've got to make the risk decisions. What happens to corporate support when everybody's home? Can you get a remote session so a vendor can do something remotely? Do they have to physically come on site? And if they are, who draws the straw of being on site and working with? We've kind of figured that out, but these are things you don't necessarily think about, particularly when we went to long-term situations. Which brings me to restart activities. As we start bringing it back to whatever normal is going to be, we're bringing more folks back on site. We're doing more like we used to do, except different. And there's a few issues that we have to deal with as we get the workforce back on site. We've got new work habits that have to be dealt with. We got the new normal. And are we going to permit home computers, things that have been at home or pieces of thing they've done at home in the workspace? One of the most common peripherals that were needed and may or may not have been corporate provided was a headset. I mean, that sounds silly, but if you're going to do your VoIP calls, and your WebEx meetings and stuff, you don't necessarily want to do it over the built-in microphone and speaker on the laptop if they're enabled. And we also discovered a remarkable number of those laptops had those devices either disabled or the users couldn't figure out how to turn it on, so it might as well have been disabled. Equally problematic. But these are the things to think about. What is it going to be like when you get back into your traditional workspace? How are you going to keep the expectations aligned as part of the workforce is in and part is still out? How are they going to still interact? How you got to make sure everybody's feeling included. Remote participation is in there. Work hours. You're going to have people working 9 to 5, as it were, and you're still going to have people with the flexible variable schedule because of activities at home. Not everybody's at the same comfort level with coming back in the shop, and that has to be okay. And what about commuters? People will have forgotten how to commute because, well, maybe not, but I worked with some folks they were coming in 100 miles. This is a non-trivial commute. And some of the commute options are no longer available to them or not available to them yet, but they're coming in. So now that you've got not only the impact on their lives, but also their mental state as they're coming into work with you. Something to remember. And it's going to be something you have to accommodate a little bit to get things going. What did you do off-site that might work really well now that you're back in the office? Maybe your old meeting solution was no good. I worked with one group. I'm an officer at my credit union. I'm a member of the board of directors. We were using a video conferencing system that was really designed for conference room system. It was awesome for conference room system. It wasn't really good for dial-in like we're doing with WebEx or Zoom. And they replaced it with Zoom, and that is now their standard. And they've actually retired the old system, and they are now on Zoom, and it is awesome. What about meeting practices? When you have people there and here, people become really polite in meetings and listening and waiting to raise their hand and stuff. What's it going to be like when everybody's in the room? Oh, by the way, have you got meeting equipment in the conference rooms if you're going to be using them? Take a look around, put out some polls. We did a survey to learn what was working for people to identify opportunities with telecommuting, and that was very educational. Some of the stuff I thought I knew was not generally what people wanted, but that's okay. Then we're trying to do the right things. And as we're coming back on site, what are we doing for those computers that are coming back? Do we need to do a posture assessment? They've been out of the office. You are keeping them patched at home, right? You're not letting them age. And you may have done some changes, like we've learned that certain types of patches will blow away all the cache windows credentials, which makes it fairly difficult if you're not VPN'd when you're trying to log in with your Active Directory credentials. Some VPNs allow connection before login. Then the thing thinks it's on its network and is happy. But these are things. Where's the security of your system? When people install new services to work remotely, are they appropriate on the corporate backbone? Have you got visibility to new things that people have installed to get work done? Maybe something to look at. And how's your enterprise perimeter? You've been working outside of it. Is it still modern? Is it still sufficient? Oh, how about this? When we're doing meetings, a lot of us like to click the record button. Where is that recording stored? And do we need to go find those and collect those? Because it's really corporate information. Or just delete them. What the heck, right? So what's the new normal at work? Are we masking up? Are we masking up when there's more than one person in the room? Are we sanitizing everything? What about break rooms? Do we have break rooms anymore? Are those going to be a thing for a while? How about a cafeteria? I mean, when we were on the road trip that we took all around the Midwest, when it came to the national parks, all the cafeterias or restaurants were to go only. And they had a limit of how many people could be inside. And they were doing all the protections they could. It made perfect sense, except they were a little conservative on keeping things hot. So we had a few cold meals that shouldn't have been cold. But I get it. What about restrooms? Are your restrooms going to become single occupant? There's a local park here in town, and one of the local academies is using it. They got the kids outside. They are doing wonderful things. They got outside playing. I saw outside art. I saw the restroom. The teachers were regulating it. Only one kid in the restroom at a time, and there was 2 classes lining up at the time I was feeling nature's call, and I decided that queue was going to be very long, and I would find an alternative solution somewhere else. By the way, the basic etiquette of a unisex restroom is lock the door, but can the door be locked? Things to think about. Oh, and conference rooms. Some of us have conference room maximum capacity settings now. Others are like, no conference room. Got to work it out. How about work that can be done, that can't be done remotely? Things that have been waiting, or have you had essential workers in doing that stuff here? There's some big categories. I don't know how many times I got teased by, you can do classified at home if you buy our solution. That is just amazing in concept. So we could create a transport to your house that was NSA approved encryption for classified information, but your house isn't allowed to have the crypto gear because it's not a vault or a SCIF. So it doesn't meet the requirements to be in there. And further, somebody said, well, we're going to have the information, we'll use that encryptor, and we're going to have just a diskless machine, so there's no storage. But it's still, you haven't met the information protection requirements, let alone how can it be seen through the window? Which is something to think about corporate, by the way. When you're setting up a home workspace, what's the visibility? Should the monitors be facing the wall? You'll notice my wall is behind me. Or the door, or no, things to think about. But what's the mission impact of not doing that classified work? If you're doing classified work, it's usually a pretty sexy project that needs to be kept going. And how are you going to restart those systems in terms of making sure you've got adequately protected systems? Systems are still good. Credentials still work. Remember, they're air gap. You need your restore plans. Something maybe more of you can relate to is experiments, lab work. You're doing, a glove box because you're dealing with something hazardous. You really can't do that at home. Most of us don't live in a biohazard level 3 lab. A lot of the equipment is disconnected because it's OT. It's not standard IT. You don't want it on your corporate network. It's not designed for it. Other things, they need hands-on manipulation and action. You're mixing things, you're controlling things. And where I work, we blow shit up. You really can't do that at home. That could go badly. It'd be fun. I mean, I do have a good friend who is, he's the guy who would blow something up in his yard and all the kids would be there. Doesn't really scale to the corporate environment, but it's awesome and I don't want him to stop. But safety is very important. Coming back to the lab, the controls, the glove boxes, all those things you really need around experiments and also mission impacts on delays. For example, if you're trying to become a COVID testing lab, you really need to be there and do that. And you've got to get all the parts right because time is not your friend. The last piece of this is that not everybody's effective working from home. We discovered that when we did a survey that there was a certain chunk that said, I don't want to work at home. I want to be in the office. They want the interaction. They don't want the focus challenges because they're in the house. They're not in the work mode. The environment isn't suitable necessarily. Or maybe they just don't want to pay for that level of service. They don't want corporate level VPN service. They want the employer to provide that. And that's legitimate. But we have to accommodate. This event didn't allow us to accommodate them. And when we come back, the office is going to be a little Spartan at first. So they might not be very comfortable at first getting that interaction. But on the other hand, they could help us really flesh out what it's like working in the future and get it smoothed out as more people join. So here we are, speed. We adapted at speed. We were changing the wheels and the oil and maybe even the transmission while we were running down the freeway. And we did it. We redefined the work environment. We have other challenges. And now you got that mindset. You learn how a real COOP event works. What are you going to do? When are you going to look at your other DR plans with that same lens? How do you make sure that they're not going to also fall flat on their face? Or maybe those assumptions were total crap. And with that, I'm ready for some questions.
You're working at speed, and the wheels stayed on, I hope, Lee. But
I don't think many fell off. It was remarkable.
So Lee, funny, CJ's not here. He's in the next room over. Last week, or maybe it was a couple of weeks ago, we had a customer that put out an RFP, and they said, "What's BHIS's response plan for dealing with the pandemic?" And we were like, "We're still here."
Right.
It's not a hypothetical. We did just fine. So, Joff, do you see any questions in the Discord channel?
No, I was just looking, and let's drop back into track one just to make sure and do a quick shout out to everybody. Lee has given us a talk about lots of interesting things to think about, of course, like Lee normally does. Is there any questions for Lee on his topic in these COVID times? Lee reminded me that earlier the phone call that John made, like the first week this hit, he's like, "Hey, Joff, we got this COVID thing," and I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, you're gonna have to work from home, just like you did last week." Yeah, kind of funny. All right, I see a few people typing.
I felt awfully privileged to work in a place that's everybody's at home, so there's no IT department. So not only am I allowed to solve my own computer problems, but I have to.
Yeah, that's right. One comment in the channel was, "You forgot about printers and staff, wanting to take those home too."
Printers, right?
Well, actually,
it's all in the timing and staff.
To talk about. We did have to deal with printers, and do we allow somebody's home printer to hook up? Are we going to hook it with a network, or are we going to hook it to the USB? The interesting challenge is, what do you hook to what? Because USB, that's a bus connection. DisplayPort's a bus connection. Which is actually usually Lightning underneath it. DisplayPort itself is fine. We absolutely had to have conversations about that and decide if we could accept the risk for our home printer. We weren't so big on taking the corporate printers home. Usually those are quite large. Right. Actually, one of the funny things is people wanted to take their ergonomic office chairs home And when there was an incident in a stairway and an accident, we decided instead it would be less expensive overall to provide people after the ergo eval that were needing a chair, basically give them a check that covers, a couple $100 on an ergo chair and let them go spend it. That was far cheaper than an accident, an ambulance ride or other type of thing.
Wow. Yeah. That would be, wouldn't it?
I can imagine. And I see a couple of comments here about, people saying, what about controlling information printed at home? And other people are saying, yeah, we've had to buy so many printers with people being at home. So I would have never have thought, right? I mean, printers, to me, printing is kind of evil and I try not to do it. But I can imagine for some businesses, it's still required.
Well, that's part of the office culture,
down
right?
in print.
Yeah, there you go. I think it's part of the office culture. Some offices still print. That's just what you do. You get a document and you print it to read it. That some places still do that, I think.
Yeah.
I print less than I ever did, and I'm old. We used to print a lot. It's learning, but you're absolutely right. You have to protect the output just as you would at work. Yeah. And so we had to provide guidance on that. And we realized we couldn't say no to printing at home. That just wasn't going to work. We had to come up with mitigations for them to accept and ways they could do it securely. And so we did. And it so far has worked out. But you're absolutely right. You need to worry about that. And actually, media, this output, maybe I printed it to work, but if I take it home, I still got to worry about it.
I think it's interesting how all of the high-tech problems that we try to solve with computer security, like cloud, Spectre, Meltdown, Rowhammer, all of these different cutting-edge techniques and these things. And at the end of the day, we end up still fighting the same battle involving technology that's like 20, 30 years old.
It's so true. It's so true.
The basics don't change.
Well, I'm starting to hear a good theme across several of these talks, though, that the security folks are learning that we can't say no to things. We can't say don't do that. We have to find a way to make it acceptable in some way. You can do your businessy thing, but please just do it in this way rather than just saying, no. Of course you can't print stuff at home. That's crazy. You got to come up with an answer. And it's great that you're doing that. And so many other people talking today are doing that. That's fantastic.
If anything, that's a theme for the modern evolution of security professional. We don't say no anymore. We say, this is the qualified, secure path that we're offering you. It's a qualified yes, is what it becomes.
Well, I think we come up with how to do it securely, and we can be transparent with where we're worried about issues. That's the best thing to do, because sometimes the users come up with a more rigid solution than I would, which is kind of cool. I don't mind them raising that.
The thing, your users are going to come up with a solution, one way or the other. They're going to do it. You either are going to like it and be associated with it, and you're going to help them come to the best decision, or they're going to go behind your back and do something really incredibly janky. But they're going to find a solution to do their job.
Well, I noticed that at my previous job,
do not be the problem they solve, right?
Right. We had some product development teams at a couple jobs ago that weren't happy with how we manage projects at work. So I was a pen tester there, so I wasn't doing policy type stuff. But I was there when the security team found out that the product development team had secretly bought a Basecamp account, and they were doing all their project management and planning in this third-party cloud-based Basecamp thing. Oh man, that was an exciting day. But they'll do that. I mean, you tell them you can't do it, they're going to find another way around.
Yeah, shadow IT explosion, right? Yeah.
Right.
Well, here's one of the interesting things. When we got policies in place related to procurement of cloud services that required assessments and approval, we found things that had been done before under the wire, but when they come up for renewal or something, it's the procurement folks are going, whoa, wait a minute, I see the C word. And that's been quite effective, quite surprisingly effective, and it's worked out very well. But you're right. I can go buy cloud services on the credit card, and it ain't expensive.
That's very true. And that actually, to me, is actually an opportunity for security professionals. It's an opportunity to actually plug into that cycle and leverage security services that the cloud providers offer. Leverage building the relationship with those various business units that are going after those services. I mean, it really represents more of an opportunity than not. than the old monolithic IT model. So
Absolutely.
well, Lee, I
And,
think we have
one
to
of the-
make a transition. Oh, go ahead, make your final comment, please.
So go ahead.
I was about to say we're going to have to make a transition over to Chris Brenton shortly, but we'll give you the opportunity to make that final comment if you like.
Well, I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity, and thanks for the questions, guys. And I'm looking forward to interacting more, because this has been a great day.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for bringing
I'm
that.
so glad to be here.